Another episode of Web3 Masterminds hosted by Cryptopolitan and Forward Protocol. And really excited today to be chatting to Ray from EcoCREDIT. Ray, welcome.
Thanks so much, Mitch. Happy to be here and looking forward to talking with you.
Yeah, tell us, whereabouts are you from, Ray?
Yeah, so I am from the beautiful state of North Carolina here in the southeastern United States, just outside of Charlotte.
Yeah, it is beautiful. I've traveled through that area. It's absolutely wonderful. I actually had a friend who used to be a real outdoorsman, and he hunted a lot and what have you. And he loved that area. Lots of wilderness, which is really special.
Yeah, absolutely. I went to Appalachian State University, which is our beloved state university here in the mountains. That's where I originally started to really have my foray falling in love with nature and just everything up there in the wilderness. So kind of started me on my long winding journey to EcoCREDIT eventually.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. Well, tell us, how did you get going in the crypto space? When was it? How did you actually get to be talking today about EcoCREDIT and being involved in that project?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey into crypto is kind of a fun one. I majored in history and political science in university, so I could put you to sleep with some lovely, boring stories, as you can imagine. And with the burgeoning market for history teachers, got out of university and thought, well, there's not much going on, and maybe I'll get into kind of a traditional finance role. So kind of meandered down that road. And in 2014, I talked to a brilliant friend of mine. He said, hey, have you heard this thing called Bitcoin? I said, no, I've never heard about it. What's it about? And then that led me down the rabbit hole of the history of central banking, fiat currencies, et cetera, all the stuff they don't teach you in school. And of course, like a chicken with my head cut off, I'm running around saying, it's the end of the financial world. The next 6 months, this is all going to collapse, et cetera. The typical overweighting new information. And from there, the rest is history. Bought some Bitcoin, started to learn about other protocols, distributed ledgers in general, and really saw this as a huge opportunity for all kinds of aspects of human freedom to begin to flourish, from economics to how we configure our social lives, and just seeing the maturation of that over the last, 7 years now has been fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, 2014, you really got into the space early.
Not what they call like the OGs. I'm just on the tail end of maybe like a new OG kind of thing, but yeah.
Well, so many people you speak to today just say, we've sort of heard about Bitcoin. We're not too sure about it. I mean, that's the point of what we're doing this afternoon, is to try and just educate people and help them a little bit, with the space and Web3 and how it's developing.
Absolutely.
So, I'm actually, I really have an affinity to what you do, because I'm an outdoor person as well. I grew up on the coast, spent many years spearfishing. And I love being outdoors, etc. As I said, I've got mates in that sort of field, and really am concerned about environmental climate change, certainly the pollution that I see. And so when you guys came up and we started chatting to EcoCREDIT, it was really exciting for me, because it's something that's close to my heart and something I think is really, really important. Because it doesn't matter what we get right in the financial system, if we mess up our environment, it's all for nothing anyway. So it's an important thing that you guys are doing. Maybe you could just give me a bit of background on EcoCREDIT and explain. I mean, I don't think a lot of people understand, what it is, what carbon credits are, and how they can really make a massive difference to our environment, our planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So carbon credits are a fantastic financialized tool that do exactly as you mentioned, Mitch. They are the greatest tool for ensuring that we can circumvent and mitigate the growing impact of climate change that we see all around the world. We are relying very heavily on the development of sustainable technologies as a wider global society, as a species. But with that in mind, these technologies take time to come online. It takes resources and optimization to figure out how to derive the greatest proportion of sustainable energy from wind power, solar panels, et cetera, pushing everyone to switch over from gasoline guzzling large trucks to electric vehicles. That's also something that takes time, and doing so too quickly could disrupt the entire, as we've seen more and more over time, the very delicate fabric of the global supply chain and economy. So with that in mind, voluntary carbon credits are the best tool for allowing individuals who say, hey, I emit carbon, I live a life in which I have some kind of impact on this wider beast we call climate change. What I would like to do is purchase this carbon credit And what that does is it takes the proceeds from this individual purchase of a credit and then takes those proceeds and gives them to a sustainability initiative somewhere in the world, whether that be a biochar project, a project that's planting trees in Costa Rica, remediating wetlands in Thailand, or something of the sort. And being that we all share this global ecosystem called Earth, no matter where these funds end up, so long as the project is actually making good on their claim to pull this carbon out of the atmosphere in one way or another, ultimately it is a way to bridge the gap between more developed, affluent nations that have a higher level of self-actualization, referring to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then patronizing these projects, whether they be in the developed world or beyond. And so this is one of the best tools we have to serve as a stopgap. The biggest challenge we have is that voluntary carbon credits as a marketplace is super, super small. It's very esoteric. Not many people know about it. And because it is so new and largely unregulated, there are many barriers to entry, such as minimum order size. Of course, being unregulated, we have to find the best brokers, make sure you're not, receiving peanuts when you're trying to buy silver, for example. And that's what we do at EcoCREDIT, is we handle the process of removing the super majority of these barriers to entry by doing three things. First, we warehouse the carbon credits, so users don't have to worry about whether or not they're buying snake oil. They can see for sure on our public registry, which connects to existing public registries of some of the most well-known and reputable entities in the space, to confirm that they are purchasing the best of the best carbon credits. As well, we standardize, which means that users don't have to say, well, do I really want to buy this biochar project from Thailand, or do I want to buy a windmill project in the Netherlands, for example? And that makes it easy for users to say, I want 1 ton of carbon, I have 1 ton of high quality carbon. And in that same breath, being that we are in crypto, we are in blockchain, we standardize, we tokenize, which allows anyone to plug in and immediately purchase carbon credits. Currently, being the traditional financial instrument that they are, voluntary carbon credits have what's called a T4 to T5 settlement time, which mirrors existing securities. So if I, as a broker, say, hey, Mitch, you want to purchase a security, I actually have a set number of days to go out and find that security, whereas I basically sell it to you on day one. I now have a period of time where I have to go make good on that security and have it in my basically warehouse. So what we do is, by purchasing these carbon credits and warehousing them, we can immediately turn around and say, hey, we have them on our books, we can sell them to you. It takes all of 5 seconds instead of 5 days. So that's what we do as EcoCREDIT, to really break down these existing barriers to entry and kind of help to more formalize and define this currently esoteric and nebulous market.
Yeah, I mean, esoteric it's an excellent word to explain it. You're a very bright guy, Ray. Just dumb it down for me and just tell me, like, I'm Mitch. I want to participate in helping the environment by, contributing and maybe buying voluntary carbon credits and participating. How would I do it? How do I interact with you as EcoCREDIT, and what is the next step for me?
Yeah, absolutely. So currently we are finalizing the parameters of this what we call the tokenized carbon credit engine. But what you can do is you can call us up, say, hey, I want to procure 10 tons of carbon because I took a road trip recently. I calculate it's around 10 tons of carbon. Can you help me out? We'll say yes.
Have you got a carbon calculator in your environment?
Yeah, so we're working on formalizing the carbon calculator. Currently, we use the industry standard, best of the best, from Vera, Gold Standard, and other third-party sources.
Right.
We blend that all together in a nice soup to say, okay, we take the mean between these calculations and say, all right, this allows you, Mitch, to calculate around average of what your carbon impact was from your road trip. We then turn around, procure the carbon, you purchase the carbon from us, and then we, of course, push that over to the sustainability projects on the other side.
So how does that function happen? How do you procure the carbon for me and then push it over? Or how do I procure it and push it over to you guys?
Yeah, most definitely. So currently we're in the beta testing environment for the actual engine itself. But what will happen is you will log on to a dashboard. You'll say, hey, I want this amount of carbon. You'll click purchase. Boom, that's all taken care of. So from a user perspective, it's seamless, it's easy, and all you have to think about is how many tons you want to purchase. This is a lot easier when compared to the traditional brokerage process. From our end, we actually have a third-party entity that we work with called Redshaw. They're one of the most reputable brokers based out of London for voluntary carbon credits. We interface with them and then in turn warehouse the highest quality carbon credits they have on their books. So we actually have a big bucket of carbon credits that we hold, best of the best quality that they sell, and then we in turn act as a more lean, mean, sleek digital broker of these carbon credits. So you, Mitch, don't have to interact and select which particular project you want to interface with, etc.
So tell me about the projects now, Ray. How do you interface with the projects, and how do they get the benefit from the funding, that the carbon credits that I've purchased?
Yeah, absolutely. So we primarily, as an entity, EcoCREDIT, deal on what's called the demand side of carbon credits. There are existing companies like Verra and Gold Standard. They verify the validity of these credits. They have people who are boots on the ground, out in the field, making sure that when a project says, hey, we're planting trees, we're healing wetlands, we're fixing mountaintop removal, they're actually out there doing it. So there are existing entities who are much further along than we are on what's called the supply side. So making sure that the supply is legitimate and good to go. They then parse these to the brokers. We interface with Redstraw as a broker, and we facilitate primarily the demand side. But with that in mind, of course, we are fully focused on transparency and everything we do. So with our application, you can click through our application, our carbon registry, and shows all the carbon credits we purchased. And then you can click through to these third-party verifiers and show that there's no discrepancy between what we're selling to our users and what has actually been logged from the supply side of the equation.
Okay, and obviously you're doing it for individuals and for businesses. And how would let's just talk about me as an individual. I've taken the road trip. I want to contribute and offset some carbon credits with a particular program. And let's just say I do have an affinity for reforestation. How would I participate in that journey and realize, and the feel-good factor, that I've actually contributed to something and I can see the good that it's doing?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a fantastic question because one of the things we are solving is indeed that challenge of access, that ability to, when you go to a supermarket and we say, hey, Mitch, you're here for some grape jelly. Well, do you want option A, B, C, D, E, or F? And you say, well, I just want grape jelly. Well, you have to pick one of these and we're going to tell you all about them. That's can be a little overwhelming. And you say, I don't even want it now. It's too much. So that's what we find is the super majority of users. It makes it simple to say, hey, here's 1 ton of carbon. Hey, I understand that. That basically mitigates this particular 1 ton that I've emitted into the atmosphere. What you're describing is, let's say, an individual who actually has an affinity to say, yes, I like reforestation specifically, and maybe I do not want to interact with a project that has to do with biochar. Because of that registry I mentioned that we have internally that points back to all of these respective projects, you can select which project that you would like to patronize specifically. So this gives you the best of both worlds in terms of accessibility and ease of purchase, should you so desire, but also it gives you the ability to customize should you so desire, all while minimizing that 5-day settlement lag time that I mentioned previously.
That's actually really interesting. And from a business's perspective, are they incentivized from the purchase of carbon credits within their business environments at all?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're seeing the business environment globally evolve very, very rapidly, especially in the European scene. There's more and more talks of things like a carbon tax for businesses, et cetera, and businesses are now being heavily incentivized to at least have some kind of climate report. Over my way in the United States, all major banks now have to have a head of sustainability who is an ESG specialist. So we're seeing more and more a focus on sustainability from a corporate perspective. So with that in mind, we allow businesses to get ahead of this growing push for sustainability by easily interfacing with our software. Currently, all we see is the largest of the large companies offer carbon offsets to their customers. So think Boeing, other international airlines. And part of the challenge there is that they have to spend millions of dollars to do exactly what we do, warehouse these carbon credits. Now, as you can imagine, warehousing carbon credits is not the primary business model for Boeing. It is an additional add-on that can introduce some capital efficiencies. It's less money that they have to go out, repair planes, et cetera. And this scales terribly as we go to smaller and smaller enterprises. Telling a pizza shop that maybe turns $1,000 a day that they need to warehouse $50,000, for example, of carbon credits to parse to their customers. Well, we can quickly see why that capital inefficiency is just too much for that small business to bear. So by interfacing with EcoCREDIT, businesses don't have to warehouse a single carbon credit. They can actually plug into our API and push the opportunity for their customers to say, hey, your slice of pizza was 0.001 tons of carbon. It'll cost you all of 5 cents to offset. Would you care to do that today? And so it puts the onus on the customer and gives them the opportunity, but not necessarily the obligation to say, yes, I'm going to go ahead and fund that 5 cents and in the name of my purchase, but also in the name of this business's carbon generating activity, offset the impact of those respective activities.
You see, I can really understand that example, and because it is very real and something that if you offered me the opportunity, I would take it up. because it's actually negligible, but I do feel that I'm contributing to something really worthwhile that I believe in. But maybe from my point of view, I'm already slightly educated, because I feel that, you know, we are making a mess of the environment and we need to do something about it. So could you just tell me a little bit about the education process? Because that's really what it is. I think if everybody understood how important it was for us to take a positive step forward and really, you know, not to let this, to try and close the door once the horse is bolted, we'd all, you know, accelerate our education and our contribution, etc. What sort of education is there, and how hard is it to get people to understand about carbon credits and the importance of it?
Absolutely, and that is such a fantastic question. We are firm believers at EcoCREDIT that enabling action does not necessarily intrinsically inspire action. So, for example, I have the ability to go to the gym every day, every 2 days, for example. And I don't. I really should, honestly. But with that in mind, we as humans have that kind of that persnickety thing to where we know we need to do, but there's always next Tuesday, et cetera, et cetera. So with that in mind, we are absolutely focused on education. We're absolutely focused on communicating the importance of these currently esoteric assets and breaking down the psychological barriers to entry in the form of understanding. But just like waking up and having to hit the gym, you still have to open your wallet and purchase these carbon credits. So with that in mind, being focused on the demand side of the equation introduces a wonderful opportunity to plug in concepts of gamification. We've seen kind of GameFi applications crop up in the crypto industry and the DeFi space, and those have been fantastic. What we're doing is we're taking a kind of inversion on the theme and saying, why don't we utilize gamification and a sense of continuity in your individualized climate action and create a fun, engaging methodology by which when you purchase carbon credits, you're having a good time. And we do that in a number of ways. So Mitch, let's say you go and you had your road trip and you buy some carbon credits directly from EcoCREDIT because you're ecologically conscious. But as well, you're tired from your trip, you turn around and you go and purchase that slice of pizza. When you click yes on that kiosk, we are developing an application where you can simply scan a QR code at any of our B2B partners and keep track of exactly how much carbon you're offsetting at any point of sale service. And this folds into any applications that are going to utilize the EcoCREDIT tokenized carbon offset engine. So our first application, EcoLand, is a gamified metaverse that offers virtual real estate for users to speculate on, customize, et cetera, should they so desire. And this is an overlay of starting off with a map of the Netherlands. So users can come in and purchase land that corresponds to land in the real world. And in turn, they can track how much of their contribution actually goes towards carbon credits, thereby reducing their carbon footprint. And this profile will remain consistent and persistent across all applications that focus on sustainability. So our goal is really to meet people where they are and gamify it as much as possible in tandem with the education component, because we have that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you have your needs met to a certain degree, you start to think exogenously. You start to think, okay, what's beyond myself that I can contribute to? How can I give back to the community and the world? Whereas you can be kind of lower on that hierarchy of needs and say, well, I'm just going to play this fun game, and it just so happens part of my contribution goes towards sustainability.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think we talk about decentralization and what we believe in and are building and the whole space. It really doesn't take a lot of contribution from an individual. In fact, it takes a very little bit if you've got a very big network. So the more people that are actually involved and contributing, you don't really even feel it, but you're making a massive impact down the track. And I think that's what I love about this whole decentralized space and what we're trying to do. And I know it's the same with what we're doing at Forward Protocol is, because we create toolkits and what have you, and take the big capital away from people up front and just allow them to have almost micropayments to utilizing smart contracts and that type of thing. It encourages more people to actually come in. And but the key element in both what you're doing and what we're doing is that education and helping people understand it. So it's a really exciting space to be in. And man, I admire what you guys are doing, right? It really is an important thing, and really, really good to, see the passion you've got for it, and how you push it through.
Awesome.
On the practical side, with what you explained to me in the gamification, if I was a pizza shop, let's just say I am a business and I do want to participate in the EcoCREDIT system, what are the practical ways of me to actually do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is something that, as you can imagine, there's an old saying: "How do you eat a whale? One bite at a time." So pushing on all fronts is part of our company ethos. We are inspired by the recent hashtag climate action now. That's something that we truly believe that we need to take, something that we maybe should have
Yeah,
been taking decades ago, for example. But
yeah,
with that in mind, for a business to integrate with us currently, it is a very case-by-case process, depends on the point of sale system a given business is using. But with that in mind, the point of sale system Stripe, what used to be Square, now rebranded as Block, they offer software development toolkits. So we are actively working on creating a seamless API to where if a business is utilizing Stripe, all they have to do is download the EcoCredit version of Stripe. It doesn't change any of their buttons or anything about their point of sale system. So there's no friction, no friction for the employees or the users whatsoever. And all it does is then turn it around for the end user, the customer, and say, hey, there's an additional option. Click the offset, and that's all calculated using our proprietary calculations. A lot of A/B testing going on because, as I mentioned, we don't want to have a situation where we go to a business and say, hey, we want you to use this. They say, yes, absolutely. And it introduces a lot of user friction, a lot of headache, et cetera. So with that in mind, we're working on modularizing the process as much as possible currently with a lot of testing. But currently, whenever a business contacts us, we discuss with the business, what's your point of sale system? What would you ultimately like to see? And of course, the biggest question is, would you like to make this an option for your customers or an obligation? Because in our pizza example, in reality, one slice of pizza to offset that carbon footprint is something to the equation of like a fraction of a penny. So many businesses that operate on smaller products that are cost less, with smaller margins overall. So for example, like a pen, most users are going to tolerate paying, for example, $1.15 instead of $1.14 if it's the difference between a no good, not eco-friendly pen and a very eco-friendly pen, for example.
and how do you incentivize a business to integrate with your Stripe Block application?
Yeah, for sure. So there's two major components of that that we're seeing kind of emerge as we talk with businesses. The first component really that I was surprised. I thought it would be the financial motive. Having been in business for myself for years, I think as a businessman, I think, okay, every penny counts. I want to make sure where every single one of those went. But with that in mind, I thought finance is going to be the thing that motivates. And so what we've tooled up is say, hey, we charge a very small spread when we sell carbon credits, and we actually cut businesses in for a small portion of that spread. So we actually make it minorly profitable for a business to work on sustainability, which is fantastic. What I was surprised by is that the financial component is almost seen as negligible by small to medium enterprises. What they're more interested in is the social proof. The idea that they can say, hey, we've offset 10% of our customers' carbon footprints derived from our sales, or hey, we've actually made this obligatory for anyone who purchases a slice of pizza to pay an extra penny or two, and now we're a 100% carbon neutral business. That social proof really is the driving, motivating factor that we found in our discussion with businesses because they really want to do the right thing. It just goes back to our airline example. If we tell a small pizza shop, well, you have to pony up $50,000 to do the right thing, well, that's the difference between being in business and going out of business.
Yeah.
Whereas when we offer them the seamless, easy ability to even make a minor profit and extend this option or even potential obligation if it's a small enough capital commitment to their users, they're ecstatic to do so because then they can shout from the rooftops, hey, I'm the first carbon negative pizza shop in town. And that makes all the difference from a social perspective.
And do you find it's easier in places like in Europe or the States where you have legislation coming through where carbon taxes are going to be in place, etc., that it's an easier sell to businesses because they already anticipate and they want to do it? So all you're doing is you're providing that solution to them that they need, because ultimately it's going to be legislated that they have to comply.
Absolutely, and that's a fantastic question. We were just speaking internally as a team about this yesterday, and you're spot on there, Mitch. That exactly in Europe there's so much discussion of carbon legislation, sustainability legislation, and businesses see this on the horizon. We as individuals get excited every New Year's. We think, hey, it's a new year, a new number. Businesses are looking 3 to 4 years down the road in terms of what the macro business environment is going to look like, and especially in the European scene, we're seeing companies over a certain earnings per year now need to have some kind of climate report, just like across the pond in the United States. I mentioned banks now have to have ESG officers. But with that in mind, also in terms of the value hierarchy, what we found is on the European continent, there's much more socially conscious, ecologically conscious businesses, just in terms of the culture in general. I'm here in the southeastern United States, and I love my homeland and my region. But you've seen, probably videos of these big, pickup trucks. They do what's called rolling coal, just boom, and all the smoke coming out. So we're getting there. We're getting there. But with that in mind, absolutely, and that kind of goes into what I call the carrot and the stick method. The carrot is, hey, we can give you this social proof. You can make your users feel good. You can offer them a carbon profile with EcoCredit, et cetera. But then we have the stick, which is governments coming and making this happen. Wouldn't you rather work with a company like us and get things attuned and get things in line, offer your users incentive instead of just having another tax slapped onto your business, essentially. So we make it a bit more fun and engaging when compared to the tax man rapping on your door asking for more money.
Yeah, it's funny when I travel, you go to Europe and people are very conscious about separating garbage and recycling, etc. It's almost part of the culture. And we certainly have some of that in South Africa, but it's not the norm. It's the people that are aware, that are educated, that are actually doing that. So I would imagine if you went to an environment like you've just said, where people are already trying to do something on one level, to incentivize them and really help them on another level it's a willing step that they want to take because they want to participate and be part of it. So which is really, really cool. Ray, tell me about EcoToken.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're a crypto project. We have to have a token. I think it's in like the unspoken laws of crypto, basically.
Yeah.
But what we're really excited about with the EcoCredit token is the dynamic utility that we bring to the table. Many tokens are comparatively, one or two trick ponies, as you can call them. If we can analogize horses and tokens. Essentially, they have one to two, maybe multiple utilities, all self-contained under the arc of a single value proposition, as it should be. If it's a currency, then it's just a medium of exchange. If it's a utility token, it should have a clear utility, because it very quickly becomes Swiss Army knife is fun, but if you're going to have 50,000 things on a Swiss Army knife, you're carrying around this brick, right? So limited utility is reasonable. But with the EcoCredit token, what we're excited about is the dynamic applications that kind of hang down below this overarching engine that we've created, that all ties back to tokenizing carbon credits. So whether that's a Super Mario game where every time you defeat Bowser, the quarter you put in goes to buying carbon credits, it's like EcoLands with a virtual metaverse, or even DeFi applications that some of the user fees go back towards purchasing carbon credits. All of these have a homogenized use case in the essence of going and purchasing carbon. So every subset application that uses the EcoCredit engine that shares in our brand has a unique utility for the EcoCredit token. So with that in mind, it is a finite token. There's 100 million of them, never going to make any more. It's deflationary. Every time someone purchases some tokenized carbon credits from the EcoCredit engine, we take a very, very small spread. I'm talking minuscule compared to existing brokers. And we use the majority of that spread to buy back and burn EcoCredit tokens on the open market, thereby making it deflationary. And that's the kind of I guess, comparatively more boring tokenomics side of things, basically reading out the user manual, right? The fun really starts whenever we actually get to the applications, because when you put in your EcoCredit tokens to the Eco DeFi application, that is something that we're actively talking about, you're going to get some benefits, whether that be reduced trading fees, et cetera. EcoLands, which is the thing coming down the pipe we are laser focused on and super excited about, is an application in which when you stake your EcoCredit tokens, you actually receive yield derived from other users purchasing virtual real estate within the application. Now, the rubber meets the road in the sense that traditional liquidity mining, liquidity providing rewards programs incentivize users with their native tokens. So, Mitch, you stake some EcoCredit tokens, we're going to give you what? More EcoCredit tokens. And that generally has a kind of sell pressure effect on the open market. Yeah. What we're doing because of EcoLands accepting USDT as payment. So Mitch, you want to buy a virtual real estate in downtown Amsterdam. Let's say you spend $10, fantastic. We actually take a portion of that. So let's say around 50 cents to to $1 of every $10 you spend, and we distribute that to EcoCREDIT token stakers. So in this way, people who stake their EcoCREDIT tokens in the EcoLand's application specifically can derive some passive income in the form of stable coins. And so that removes the sell pressure from the EcoCREDIT token. It gives the EcoCREDIT token a deep utility within this one application. And keeping in mind, there's multiple applications on the horizon that all use this overarching sustainable engine. It means that the EcoCREDIT token has evolving utility over time.
That's actually really interesting. It's a nice way of doing it because, and I was just thinking with businesses, are you encouraging them to come and buy land in EcoLand, and is that part of your cycle?
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic question. So in the MVP, the first release of EcoLands, absolutely we are encouraging businesses to hop in, participate. And the reason being is you can set custom images and profiles. So for example, if I own, Ray's Pizza Shop in downtown Utrecht, I can purchase that tile and I can put my logo on there and encode a message that says, hey, come on down, here's our website. Additionally, in future versions of EcoLands, kind of running with the concept of gamification for both individuals and businesses, we are actively exploring adding a second layer. So for example, let's say the actual virtual version of the pizza shop itself that you can see in the top-down map overlay, and allowing businesses to purchase or rent their own business in the metaverse. And then we, of course, contribute a super majority of the proceeds from that rent, first and foremost to carbon credits, but then take the remainder of that rent and give it to the owner of the land itself. So in this way, we're creating this hierarchy of value from users who can purchase virtual real estate and then at a later point in time, derive some kind of profit motive from the actual businesses coming in and renting their own virtual version of their business. And going back to the profiles that I mentioned that have that sense of continuity, businesses can then turn around and show regulators, et cetera, how much they're actually contributing down to the penny to voluntary carbon credits, all within the EcoLands application. So rather than having to file the new form that's going to come up, we'll call it, they always have such lovely forms for these government forms, like, 138-C. So it's like, oh, I couldn't remember 138-C, darn, I have to go to the database again. Instead of having to find that and have your tax accountant fill that out, our ultimate goal is to, when this version of EcoLands goes live, along with the B2B application, we just send your business a PDF and you say, oh, this is how much carbon I've offset this quarter. You give that to your accountant and it's a done deal. Make it as simple and gamified as possible, while also making it accessible as possible for businesses to, as you so eloquently put it, Mitch, it's not a big impact when it's just us as individuals, everyone contributing their part. But if you've ever walked along a highway and see, the litter here and there, you think, man, this is a huge job for one person. So in that way, that's how we're trying to democratize access and incentivize access, not just through making it possible, but making it genuinely enjoyable, engaging, and giving the carrot rather than using the stick.
So let's talk about EcoLand a bit, because it sort of plays into what I wanted to ask you about your opinions about the metaverse and the greater sort of blockchain space and what have you. Mm-hmm. What you said about a company being able to file their carbon credit form and then offset it and prove to the authorities that they've actually done it. That's obviously gamified in EcoLand. And so if I had a tile in EcoLand that was my particular pizza store, and would I have the functionality to file it in EcoLand where somebody could go and access it, or how's it gamified for me as a business?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's something we're actively exploring and working on in terms of like the putting on your Oculus Rift headset and going and buying your virtual pizza. Probably won't taste as good as the actual pizza, but nevertheless, always fun. But with that in mind, really, we're setting the early stages of the first the virtual real estate. So just buying the actual tile, which represents the land, and then the second iteration will actually allow the tile owner to derive potentially passive income from anybody who's renting the business on top of that land. Now, the gamification of the actual business activity itself, that can come in any number of ways. We actually are looking at potential 3D voxel-esque kind of realms, metaverses where you can walk around downtown Amsterdam, et cetera. But with that in mind, what we really like to do is we like to under-promise and over-deliver rather than over-promise and under-deliver. I know that kind of puts both Forward Protocol and EcoCREDIT as a bit oddballs out in the space, right? Because we see all kinds of talks about, oh man, we're going to have this amazing thing. It's going to be the unicorn of crypto, and it ends up being a horse with a paper towel roll kind of glued to its head. So with that in mind, we're not promising anything like an Oculus Rift interactable metaverse right now, but suffice to say, at every turn and every twist, we are laser focused on gamification, because by making it enjoyable for the businesses and for their clientele, it draws more and more people in and creates that social proof that creates that momentum. And for context, the voluntary carbon credit industry globally is only $1 billion in annual volume, which as an
Wow.
individual, it sounds like a ton, right? It's like, oh, billion. I'd love to have $1 billion. But
Yeah,
it's
but I think yeah, it's tiny in comparison to the value-driven economy. It's like it's tiny. I mean, that definitely needs to be upped. So,
exactly.
with the metaverse, Ray, obviously we are right at the beginning, and we're sort of in the whole hype stage, and then eventually it'll taper off a bit, and then the guys will start building it. Guys like you will go and build EcoLand, and the other guys will build their metaverses. What do you see sort of down the track? Until it becomes something that is a real useful part of what we do. Do you think it's going to take, I mean, we can see the acceleration, the excitement now. So 2022 is all about that. Do you think it's going to take a bit of a while to really get entrenched and for people to accept it and to start putting some real effort into it and building it?
Yeah, absolutely. I like the quote that we tend to severely overestimate the implications of technology in the short term. We think, hey, Bitcoin's around, see you central banks, 2009, Bitcoin gets invented. By 2015, yeah, we'll be done with central banks. We'll have a utopia. It'll be fine. Yeah. So we tend to overestimate the implications of technology in the short term, but we underestimate them over the long term. So, 2017, everything crashes. People think, crypto and decentralized stuff, that's all dead. And they come back and there's this beautiful thing called the decentralized finance movement, and just blows people's minds. All of a sudden you tell them you can make a 150% APR and they say, in this interest rate environment, are you serious? So with that in mind, to apply that to the metaverse, I think absolutely it's going to take some time. It's going to take some years to actually get this sort of technology fine-tuned, and there's going to be hiccups along the way. We can't forget in 2015, Dows were a thing in 2015, decentralized autonomous organizations, and everyone was so excited about it. But then you had the DAO hack, which actually gave rise to Ethereum Classic. It was a huge debacle. It was chaos. So this kind of evolution and this kind of technology takes years to actually reach even a semblance of maturation. And given that we're at the intersection of this really small, paltry-sized market, $1 billion a year, and the beginning of this concept we call the metaverse, this virtual world where I could plug in. I love the idea of plugging in my Oculus and looking around. So it looks goofy, but it's fun. Being at the starting point of both of those at the same time, there's near endless potential, and I don't see this slowing down anytime soon.
I think I agree with you 100%. Let's talk about DAOs, Ray. How important do you think they're going to be in the future with organizing communities and societies, and certainly in what you're doing with carbon credits?
Yeah, absolutely. So DAOs are amazing. I was talking with a great friend of mine, and we were talking about the idea of corporate structure. And I said, well, what is a corporation? How does this work? And he referred to me an excellent piece, and Naval recommended it. And of course, as I mentioned it floats out of my head, and I don't know the name of it. So I'll share that with you, Mitch, when I grab that after the call here. But it was the idea that corporations started first as entities where, Mitch, if you and I formed a corporation, we built a railroad, and the railroad, the train fell off the tracks, and people got hurt. We were personally liable. Over time, corporations evolved to not have that, which allowed you to have shareholders. So, just because, Mitch, let's say you and I buy some Tesla stock and someone crashes their Tesla, they're not knocking on my door at 2 a.m. or your door at 2 a.m. and saying, hey, you owe me money because I crashed a car and you own stock. So it allowed for greater levels of organization, greater levels of participation, and kind of democratization of who owns what and how are they involved. DAOs are kind of, in my opinion, the logical next step of this evolution of how humans configure themselves. So now every share has some vote. So even if I own 1 out of 1 billion DAO tokens, I still have a seat at the table. And what's even more amazing is that you can receive these DAO tokens, these voting shares, in exchange for actual valuable contribution to the given community. And so it allows for a more a greater level of monetary velocity, but it's not necessarily money, really equity velocity, shares in a particular community or entity based on your contribution of your labor, your time, and most importantly, how the larger whole perceives that relative value in terms of your contribution. So DAOs are fascinating. They're amazing. Again, this is getting back to kind of my nerdy political philosophy, political science background, right? But I see it as kind of the next stage of how we configure ourselves in a democratic fashion. Who's to say where it actually goes? I mean, in 20 years, we could all have like mega, ultra kind of weird confluences of NFTs and Dows, and we're forced to wear the little Oculus things. But I'm more bullish on humanity and innovation than that. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it is important, but just a matter of interest, not particularly relevant to what we're talking about today. You might find it interesting to go and read up where companies originated from, where the original company came from, and how it's actually linked to beer, because it's fascinating. Anyway, I'll give you some homework to go and read about it. I got an English mate, and an English mate, and he actually told me the history, and it's fascinating how these things all come about. And you think about Dows and how we're going to be organizing community, which is really important. And Web3 being the read, write, own web, where we start by the tokens we hold. I hold some eco tokens, and I start owning a portion and have some relevance in that community. And the more I hold, and the more relevance I had, and the more I contribute, the more part of that DAO I become, and become part of the governance. And so I think it is really important. And I think DAOs are going to be a big way we organize society going forward. So excited to see how it is developing and what's coming along. And I think it's an important part, certainly a very important part of the way we educate people, and people get to understand that it's not just the one way that we've grown up with, but things are accelerating and changing. And I think certainly for guys like yourselves that are a lot younger than me, it's a lot easier to grasp and to assimilate, because it's part of that community-driven engagement with the way games grew and the way people participated online. And it's an easy step into the metaverse, which is really good. And yet on the other side, you have a lot of sort of older people that are very concerned about environment, or because they've seen such massive changes in their lives. And I think connecting those two in that education is a crucial part of how we go forward. So excited to see how it all fits in. Ray, tell me, with NFTs, how do they fit into the way you see we're going to be organizing it? And is it a part of what you do in your environment, in your project?
Yeah, absolutely. Just to circle back very briefly, currently EcoCREDIT, the token, it's not a DAO token. That is something we're actively exploring, is implementing a DAO in the future. But with that in mind, we like to not put the cart before the horse and maybe democratize something that, in terms of shareholdership and voting, shouldn't necessarily have that that level of integration yet. So just a bit of clerical clarification there.
Yeah, no, fine.
In terms of NFTs, NFTs are fascinating. I've been primarily interested to see the social division it's caused, because I see people in our industry, Mitch, we think NFTs, we think, oh, it's a good technology, it's something we can use, where does it fit in, etc. I saw this wonderful explanation of NFTs having both flex and function. So the flex is, hey, I have CryptoPunk number 987. Look at me, I'm cool. There's only one of these. It's worth however many millions, kind of thing. But it's the kind of thing you can't even put it in a snow globe. I guess you could if you had a virtual projector, but it's just something that sits there on your shelf, right? Whereas the function is something like, hey, we're going to issue 10,000 of these virtual NFT tickets. Just like on your phone, you have Ticketmaster, you can buy a ticket, scan, etc. This creates a more robust version of essentially that framework. So there's both flex and function NFTs. And as I mentioned, in our industry, Mitch, we're cool with it. We think it's really cool. We're just trying to figure where it fits in. The other side of that equation is I have friends who hate NFTs. They see them from the outside. They think, oh, these are just stupid pictures of monkeys and then in Bored Ape Yacht Club, and like, how does this work? This is crazy. So it's really interesting to try and talk people down from that position, and then say, well, no, it's about the technology, et cetera. It actually harkens back to when I first got into Bitcoin many years ago. And I was telling my uncle about it. And I was like, oh, it's like digital money. It lives online, et cetera. And I'm working with this kind of stuff. He's like, oh, so you're a criminal. Like, no, it's just digital money. He's like, no, that sounds extra illegal. Like, you're definitely a criminal. So it's kind of like we're at that stage with NFTs currently. But I think they're going to be a huge feature in this tech stack going forward. And it is something we utilize at EcoCREDIT. Anytime we attest a batch of carbon credits to the Polygon chain and say, hey, we're minting these as tokenized carbon offsets, we indeed use NFT technology for that, because a biogas project is different from a teak tree project, is different from a wetlands remediation project. So we leverage that ability to say, hey, what's the fungible component of this? Well, the tons of carbon. What's the non-fungible component? Well, the trees or the wetlands, et cetera. So we absolutely utilize that technology, not just for the flex of, well, when you purchase a tile in EcoLands, that's minted as an NFT because your tile is unique, but it shares that commonality of being part of the Netherlands on this map. We use it for that flex because, Mitch, if you want to buy all of downtown Amsterdam, you can definitely flex with that. But we also have that function of it does differentiate. It does show off that this is something different, and that's crucial for the actual discernment of what carbon goes where in our technology.
And I think, most people, when you speak to them about NFTs, they do think Bored Ape, et cetera, CryptoPunk type thing. That's in their mind. They think it's just a pixelated version, and why would you ever pay that sort of money for it? But exactly. As you've explained, the utility of actually using it to attach to any asset or anything that has got some form of ownership, whether it's a tile or whatever you use it for in your ecosystem, whether you're in e-commerce, or the functionality is absolutely amazing. And I think, I know, part of what we do at Forward is our proof of ownership smart contract is basically an NFT contract, and it has wide utility, right across for every different business as they see that they want to do it. And what we talk about a lot, I talk with Key a lot about, most guys, when you talk about your friends and they can't see any value in these NFTs, these apes and punks and what have you, it's maybe because they just don't understand. So a lot of my mates are like that as well. If I talk to them about blockchain, their eyes roll back in their head and they get bored about it. But if I talk about their business, they fired up about it and they're interested. Mm-hmm. And so what we focus at Forward is that interface where they do what they're doing and the front end looks exactly what they're doing. It doesn't change, but the back end is utilizing the blockchain and technology and NFTs, etc. And they're getting the benefit of it without going through the huge learning curve to actually understand a very, very technical space and a concept. So it's a very, very interesting time that we're going through, Ray. It's super Absolutely. Interesting the way things are evolving.
It is, and hey, I'm an annoying level of optimist. I'm a super optimist, so it's good. We made a lot of progress because if you said your mates, they roll their eyes and they're like, oh, man, at least they're not saying, I don't know what that is, and it sounds like you're going to jail. So at least they've heard about it. At least we're starting to have that social kind of percolation of these concepts and these technologies. So we're making slow but sure progress. And to your point, that's you hit the nail on the head, really, Mitch. You said it really eloquently there. I kind of liken it to cybersecurity. It's something that is this big nebulous thing. There's attack vectors everywhere, and I just want to use my computer and look at cat pictures. What do I do? Well, Kaspersky, McAfee, et cetera. These are the first really consumer-focused applications that allow you to say, hey, put this on your computer and you're safe, right? Similar to, hey, here's some NFT technology. We're not going to change the front end interface of your business. Plug it in. Now it's more distributed. It's more efficient. You have actual provable ownership, et cetera. So watching these kind of eras of technology evolve, it's really a blessing to be at the front and center of it, in my opinion.
Absolutely right. Ray, with what you guys are doing and the blockchain space, Web3 and what have you, what do you see as the bottlenecks? What's slowing you down? I mean, you're doing something really important. How can you actually speed it up?
Yeah, absolutely. For us in particular, the bottleneck really is just, there's this annoying concept that we keep running into, and it happens consistently. I check the clock and it's just 24 hours in a day. And that's really the bottleneck that we're running into, is that need to have, oh man, I'm looking for that 36-hour work.
I'll make some notes. We can see if we can get that sorted out by some of the clever guys.
Absolutely. Get that situated in the your turnkey smart contracts. If we could just program that in to get that extra day extension, that'd be awesome. And here I was a week ago complaining about daylight savings time, but I digress. With that in mind, we are building on all fronts and pushing like crazy. We recently released a demo version of EcoLand to show the community what it's about, how it works, and we're actively taking applications for beta testing that software. The biggest bottleneck, honestly, is the fact that it is such a small market. $1 billion a year in terms of volume. people just now starting to kind of gain that social consciousness of, hey, okay, maybe this is something I need to work on, or maybe they're on the other side of that equation saying, hey, governments are pushing regulations for this. This is something we're going to have to work on, really because it is in that nascent kind of early stage. I liken it to Bitcoin 2011, 2012. We haven't even had the Mt. Gox moment yet where, oh, now the news is talking about the voluntary carbon credit market. That's really where our challenge is coming in, is facilitating that understanding. But as I mentioned, thankfully, by focusing on gamification, when I was still a teenager when the game Farmville became very popular on Facebook, and oh man, become popular, did it ever. Everyone's mother was playing Farmville on Facebook. It was crazy. They were going at each other for virtual nails and virtual cows. And that really inspired me and my kind of mindscape. I'm like, wow, if we can activate millions and millions and millions of people with virtual cows and virtual nails, certainly we can gamify sustainability and make it accessible. So we're really trying to accelerate that timetable, but really that nascent nature is really our biggest hurdle. And I'm pleased to say with all humbleness as well that we're so far very successfully overcoming that hurdle. Because at the end of the day, as the song goes, girls just want to have fun, and so do boys and guys and everyone in the world. So it makes it easy to actually get involved.
Yeah. It's I suppose if you look at the overall market now, maybe there are a couple of 100 billion people involved in the blockchain crypto space, wallets, whatever it is, whatever that number is. And as well as I do, I mean, a rising tide lifts all ships. And I think, as it matures, if you think the success that you're having now and the spotlight on maybe just $1 billion, as legislation pushes, you've got that push, you've got the rising awareness, the education of people. As Bitcoin's price goes up, people get more interested, etc. You get more adoption, and so your model is really well timed and poised to actually accelerate and to take advantage of that, which is fantastic. So it's I think it's just a matter of time, and I'm really happy to hear of the progress you've made and what have you, because it's something that I think about all the time and discuss, because it's important to me to have an environment and to create sustainability. So it's it's really cool, right? Really cool. Tell me, does legislation internally in the blockchain space, do you find any hurdles with legislation in what you're doing?
Thus far, nothing too prohibitive or preventative from our perspective. Being that we push on all fronts, we are largely what I call a hybrid company. So yes, we have our token, we are Web3, but we like to use our head developer, our CTO likes to use the term, build it in a way my mother can understand. When we start talking about distributed technologies, very quickly, mom's eyes glaze over and she's like, okay, I don't understand, this is boring. I'm glad my kids are having 100%. Fun, but don't get it. So we do have a Web 2 focus as well, where first we're starting with Web 3, and we're actually going to work backwards to where if someone wants to purchase a tile in EcoLands, for example, they can connect their credit card or debit card and what have you. So with that in mind, we're not having too much issue with the legislation, because now largely global governments see this as something that is preeminent. It's something that's just going to not go away. And so they're looking to kind of foster positive innovation. But with that in mind, there is a bit of worry as it pertains to, for example, the recent law that passed in the European Union regarding privacy and blockchain applications, because as kind of a non-OG yet still early adopter of the technology, this kind of culture and this kind of level of freedom to innovate is really what portended this evolution of technology to begin with. So I personally do have a bit of worry regarding the trajectory of legislation, but at present, no, there's no existing legislation that's prevented us from really pushing on all fronts and moving things forward.
Do you think being identified by your address, your private key, or whatever it is, would get away from like GDPR and all those sort of things that they're so concerned about? Because you don't really know who I am if I send you some crypto or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely think there's some significant risk there. Anytime there's a push for greater financial surveillance, then that's going to kind of pop out and drive more people to crypto. For example, in the United States, now they're talking about limits of $600 or more for cash deposits. You have to fill out a form, which is quite ridiculous in my opinion. But point being, this drives more and more people to what they perceive as distributed financial solutions. But with that in mind, that ultimately kind of has that double-edged sword, right? The chicken and the egg problem, with more people being pushed away from the traditional financial system and into the arms of what they see as distributed, decentralized protocols, the greater the push for government to come in and add some kind of regulatory red tape around the industry. Some for good, some consumer protections, which is fantastic, some not so good, which has the ability to maybe stifle some of that innovation that grew out of that original culture of anonymity, privacy, etc. So we still don't know who Satoshi is, so I think that speaks volumes as to the ethos that he maybe wanted to embody.
Yeah, but there's definitely a middle ground, and I think when you find it, you find that the industry you're in, the carbon credit industry, is going to grow, because I think a lot of corporations, etc., are bound by corporate governance, and they can't move forward in unregulated space. It's very difficult for them. So we've seen that with Fri. As it gets a little bit more regulated, you find more money flowing in, and certainly with the technology, it'll benefit them long term. So I believe that a solution will be found, and it'll be for the greater good. And Ray, it's been super chatting to you. I'm going to definitely keep in contact, because it's it's something that's really close to what I believe and think is important. Maybe you could just in a couple of minutes just wrap up, give us some final thoughts, and then we'll say cheers.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, Mitch, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure chatting with you as well. Definitely stay in contact. One thing I do want to share is we are starting with EcoLands with the Netherlands, which is a comparatively small country, yet we're breaking it down to 16 by 16 meter tiles. So we have 156 million tiles throughout the entirety of the Netherlands. So we are not being bashful with incentivizing folk to jump right in. So Mitch, I'll have to send you some tiles after the call. Can't promise we'll be in downtown Amsterdam, but with that in mind, we're finding skin in the game is where it's at to get people activated and motivated. So consider it your first Farmville cow that I can send over to you. But
that's
yeah,
cool. Thanks.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's been a pleasure. We're really excited what we're doing. Echo your sentiment completely. The industry is so young, this voluntary carbon credit industry, and we found very few consumer applications, and even, of course, even less so business applications that focus on gamification and making it genuinely fun and engaging to live a more sustainable lifestyle. So we're super bullish on what we're doing, and as well as what other companies are doing. We are first and foremost focused on co-opetition. Of course, we know that the pie is growing very rapidly. So we're at a period in time where if everyone's working together on sustainability, especially like Climate Dow, we're not boohooing Climate Dow or Monster, any of these entities, because we're all working towards that common social good of sustainability. So we're in a really unique position of when somebody wins, even if it's not us, everybody wins, which is fantastic. Absolutely. So just appreciative of the opportunity, appreciative of everyone who's listening, and yeah, let's make some magic happen and save our planet.
Yeah, thanks, Ray. It's very well put, man. And thanks again for being here. Appreciate it.
Absolutely, Mitch. You have a good one.
Cool. Cheers.